The structure many times depends on the people. In a perfect world, right, you would have a CMO come in, or maybe not a perfect world, but you would have someone come in and say, okay, this is how I want to structure the marketing team. At the end of the day, it almost never works that way because you have people that are there already, especially in the larger companies like we talked about. You have people that are already there. You have skill sets that are already in place. You might bring someone in to manage from above, or someone might grow from below. And you have to first kind of, in my opinion, look at what's there. Find your superstars, potentially give them managerial positions where they're going to grow into it, or they might have some managerial experience, but they're going to grow, and then fill in the holes.
Welcome to the Marketing Academy Podcast by GCMO, where in every episode we sit down with a marketing expert to deep dive into a hot topic shaping the industry. I'm Yitzy Tannenbaum. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Marketing Academy Podcast by GCMO. I'm Yitzy Tannenbaum, and today's guest is Lisa Bennett, which is very exciting. Now, if you want to learn more about Lisa, you could actually listen to the full Shout Out podcast, also by GCMO, and really get a deep dive into how Lisa started from the bottom and became a CMO. It's a very interesting and, you have a very cool life story.
Not very typical.
Not very typical, but yes, very random. So a quick plug to our sister podcast of Shout Out. I'll let you introduce yourself, but before that, I will say that the topic today is building a marketing team, how that looks like in large companies, how it looks in small companies, and hopefully we could look at it through the prism of managers who are looking to build out their teams, but also individual contributors who want to understand how they fit into that bigger marketing setup, and maybe also position themselves well when looking for jobs. So all that, and it'll be fun. So Lisa, tell us a little bit give us a short version of
of the shout out
of the story, or maybe just tell us a little bit about your recent marketing roles.
Sure. So after a very interesting and probably not very typical career in marketing, I was CMO at Kaltura. Had been at the company for a very long time, about 17 years. Grew there, and it was an amazing experience, amazing people. And about a year and a half-ish ago, I left Kaltura and kind of started to think, what's the next step? And I decided that I want to, on one hand, definitely stay in marketing, stay in the game, stay in this world of tech marketing. But on the other hand, maybe not as intensely and as crazily as a typical schedule might be for a CMO. So I actually have joined an amazing company called Wevo, which is acquired by SolarEdge. So we're actually now part of the larger SolarEdge group.
Just when you thought you were out of the large companies, they pull you back in.
Yeah, but the cool thing about working at Wevo, and actually I'm there as CMO, but I actually do it as a 50% gig, which is really cool. But I agreed with my CEO that it's 50% on paper, and he gets at least 200% of Lisa.
That's kind of the trick of all these like part-time jobs. They say, oh, it's only a 75% of the job. That just means you have less time to do the work you need to do.
For me, though, I have to say it was a mindset thing. So I don't want to take too much time of the topic, but ultimately, the needs that were required at that point and the size, et cetera, it made sense. And for me, most weeks I probably give a little more.
Right.
But the fact that it's in my brain, 50% is enough for me to kind of have that peace of mind. I recently started working also with a great startup called Ramapi. And really cool startup in the world of digital health, making a lot of waves. And then I do lots of volunteering. I do my 4 kids. I do a lot of traveling with my husband and kids. So I've found a bit of a different balance, but it's working, and it's really, really great, and I'm very fortunate.
Yeah, and you're very busy, so I appreciate the short amount of time that you were able to give us. So let's jump into it. Let's talk a little bit about marketing and marketing teams. Start with the typical, maybe kind of large company or like what should be the considerations? How would you build out that kind of larger marketing team as opposed to we'll get to the scrappy startup
Sure.
later, but start with the bigger company, maybe 1,000, 3,000, like bigger sizes, and what would a marketing organization look like there?
Sure. So first of all, in my experience, there isn't one company structure or one structure of a marketing team that I've seen replicate itself. Like everybody has different nuances, different structures, different teams, etc. There are some pillars, right? And groups that you probably need to have. My experience, of course, is in B2B, so I'll speak to that mainly. I assume that in B2C it might be a different balance, although at the end of the day, I think many of the tactics are similar and the team members are similar, but for example, in B2C, you might have a much larger paid group and digital marketing group as opposed to maybe in B2B. But the way we built things, when I was working on a larger team was we kind of split it. I like to say the art and the science. At the time, the team used to get annoyed when I said that because they felt like it wasn't necessarily the right way to position it. But so we had two main groups. One was brand and the other was growth. And brand also included a lot of strategic marketing. And at the end of the day, my team actually was right because we didn't build it in the maybe exact logical way of brand and growth, but ultimately I think in today's world of marketing especially, you have to make sure that you have the art and the science in the team. And brand, of course, has to include usually things like the creative team, the team that's working on design and video, tactically, but also strategically, like what do we want to say? How do we want to be portrayed? How do we want the market to see us? How do we want to rise above the noise? And then the digital team has to actually take that, or the growth team has to say, okay, now how are we actually going to translate that into numbers? How are we going to translate that into things that we can measure? Many times you need to make sure that you also have a communications team or a PR. Depending on the size, you might have IR that sits in marketing. And then you've got the SDRs, which many times can sit either in marketing or in sales. I obviously advocate that it should be in marketing.
They're always like this like cousin or uncle that are kind of related. They're kind of part of the family, but they're also not because their methodologies just seem so different, although they are kind of that link between marketing and sales a little bit.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, right, it depends how deep you want marketing to go into the funnel. And I think increasingly we're seeing that marketers and CMOs are getting objectives that relate to actual revenue, which I think is correct.
Yeah.
I will say, though, I don't know, I'm kind of losing my faith a little bit in attribution. Although I'm not sure that we ever proved that it was a viable thing. Definitely, there's always that tension between what we're spending versus what we're influencing versus what we're bringing in. There's a lot of debate around direct attribution versus, influence and all that good stuff. But yeah, the SDRs are kind of that glue. At Kaltura, for example, back in the day, we had it sitting in both places depending on the time of year. Now, for a few years, SDRs were in sales, then they moved over to marketing, and kind of you can go back and forth.
There's a case for both.
There's definitely a case for both. It's a critical piece in B2B sales. I think that we have yet to see how much AI will influence that and how much it can be kind of systematically automated versus that personal touch. But I am, as I follow a lot of huge, amazing marketers like John Miller and like Dave Gearhart and Kieran Flanagan, et cetera, I feel like there's so many shifts happening in marketing these days that each piece of the puzzle has yet to kind of get resettled into the general marketing theme or scheme of things. So it's interesting to see. But to go back to your original question, which I don't know if I actually answered beautifully, but I think you have to have the various pillars and elements within your marketing team. The structure many times depends on the people. In a perfect world, right, you would have a CMO come in, or maybe not a perfect world, but you would have someone come in and say, okay, this is how I want to structure the marketing team. At the end of the day, it almost never works that way because you have people that are there already, especially in the larger companies like we talked about. You have people that are already there. You have skill sets that are already in place. You might bring someone in to manage from above, or someone might grow from below. And you have to first kind of, in my opinion, look at what's there. Find your superstars, potentially give them managerial positions where they're going to grow into it, or they might have some managerial experience, but they're going to grow. And then fill in the holes. You do need to make sure, though, that you have those elements of kind of brand, creative, even if some of those roles are filled by freelancers, that then either are brought in-house or handled by agencies. And then, of course, the kind of the science side of things, the operations team, that kind of connects everything together. Content, of course, is a critical piece, or you won't have what to operate or what to do. And yeah, those channels of events, digital, paid, organic, social, etc. And you have to kind of start filling in those gaps.
But there are two main buckets, which I very much agree with. There's the bucket of the more creative side of the house, and that's where you would find the content creators, the video creators, like people who are putting out content and creating things. And then the other side are the demand gen, or the science, as you called it. These are the people who are making sure that content gets into the right hands and to the right eyeballs, right?
And measuring it and seeing what works. And then you have a beautiful, in a good case scenario, you have a great feedback loop between the two. So on one hand, the brain, right, or the science part, they're kind of giving the feedback of, okay, this is what's working, this is what isn't. This was a flop. This was an anomaly, And so the creative team then knows what to create more effectively, and vice versa, right? You also have to make sure that you're getting from the creative team influence from the market, the field, others, trends that are happening, etc. And it should flow beautifully in synergy.
It's kind of like a marriage, I feel, that because one can't succeed without the other. You could write the best white paper or create the best video, but if the wrong people are seeing it, you could get a ton of views, but it's not your target audience or ICP, then it was a waste. And then the other way around, right? You could have, target the exact persona, but the messages aren't resonating and the content isn't engaging. So both teams need to work very, very closely together to create that win.
Absolutely. And by the way, as long as we're talking about marriages, you probably need to have multiple spouses in the organization, or maybe we could come up with another analogy. But yeah, similarly, if you're a CMO or you're a marketing person, it doesn't have to be at the highest levels at all. You need to be working with sales. You need to be working really closely with product. You need to make sure you're working with finance. For sure, you're working with HR, because that's another great synergy. So especially in the larger organizations, the more relationships you have within the organization that are based on mutual respect and appreciation and knowledge that you're gleaming from the various other functions, you're going to be much more successful at that.
I definitely agree. And I think at least for me, the main points of contact will be the product team, because they're building the product. And if I'm able to tell them what we're building and why, like if we're able to influence the product very early on and make sure the product meets the market needs, that's a great relationship. I think it's very hard to build that. The other side is the sales team. The sales team know what customers are saying, what they really are interested in, what features they love, what they hate, what the gaps are, what the competition are pitching, what the pricing is in those worlds. And then I think customer success also have a lot to say, just because also they speak to customers so regularly. They speak to customers more than they speak to people in our own organization. So they have their finger on the pulse. They know what's going on. So do you want to talk a little bit about how you build those relationships? Because a lot of those teams don't owe you anything. How do you earn a seat at the table? I feel like that's what every new company I come to, I need to earn that seat, prove to them that they want me there.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big believer in just personal relationships, right? And just people. So first of all, it starts with smiles, right? Like it seems trivial, but it is. I mean, if you come in and you're already with a positive attitude and you're there, I think it's also important to position yourself and marketing in general as there to serve them in many ways, right? At the end of the day, marketing needs to, make the business successful, make sales successful, make the products shine, etc. So if you position yourself as someone who's coming in to learn from them and help them actually achieve the business's ultimate goals, then I think you're already at a great place. In addition to that, you need to know I don't want to curse on air, but you need to know your stuff, right? So you need to come in constantly with data, with trends, with learnings. So the more value you can provide to them and the more value they can provide to you, it has to kind of really be like a synergic relationship. And always just be positive, helpful, personal, and all that great stuff. By the way, I didn't mention at the beginning product marketing, which is a critical piece of whatever you're building. Another area, by the way, that sometimes sits in marketing, most times sits in marketing, but we've had cases that it can sit in product as well. But I think that's the thing, right? Like, the more you break down those silos, and I think tech has gotten better at that over the years, of understanding that it all is interconnected and everyone has a joint goal. But that's really critical. I think leaving egos at the door is always a really good policy, not always possible. And sometimes you might want to behave differently with different areas. But I think that's how you build almost any relationship, but definitely in that scenario.
I also think that like teams in different geographies make things more challenging. It's a lot easier to build relationships when you could have lunch with someone than they start their day when it's 7 p.m. your time and you're just tired and cranky and they still haven't woken up, so no one's happy. But yeah, just breaking bread and hanging out. That's.
I think. Look, if I'm looking at like my years of experience, I think when I was younger and I didn't necessarily prioritize those relationships as much as I maybe should have, you tend to get into your comfort zone. And also many times, like, you just don't have a ton of time on your hands, right? We're all busy, etc. And it's critical not to let that kind of get deprioritized. So those relationships, and especially when they're remote, right? Like, how many times have we had a bi-weekly call that we set to just sync between sales and marketing, and you're like, oh, sorry, I can't make it this time, and you can't make it this time, and ultimately you end up with like 3 months that you haven't connected. That's not a good thing. You have to make sure, especially at higher levels, that you keep those relationships going, because that's how you kind of go in different directions. And many times marketers feel like they know everything, just like sales think they know everything and product think they know everything. And instead of getting the actual feedback and the real information, you're going on assumptions, and you didn't take the time to actually continue to, keep those relationships alive and to actually spend the time. When I was also kind of having the 4 kids I have, et cetera, like, travel isn't always something that you want to do. And like you said, face-to-face has a lot of value. So you can't always, give up, and you have to make sure that you're still prioritizing those things, because otherwise it's just not good for your career. It's not good for your business, and it's not good, for those ongoing relationships.
So personal relationships are really important. I think the other thing that you did mention is, at the end of the day, you have to provide value. And an example that comes to mind is the worst thing for a marketer is when sellers build their own pitch decks. Because we know what works. We've done this a million times, and they look, no offense to the sellers here, but they look terrible. They're completely off message. So there was a time where I built a deck, and it was really good, and I pushed it and I forced them to use it. And the best feedback I got is when the seller came back to me and told me, hey, you know what? This actually works, and this actually resonates.
Wow.
And all you need to do is have that 1 or 2 instances where you have to fight for it, but when you fight for it, they use it, even if they're not happy about it, but then it works. Then the 3rd time, they'll be like, hey, you know what? There's something that actually works here. So I think you have to provide your value to sellers, to the product team, right? If you come with insights and data, And that data could actually influence what they're doing or help prove what they're trying to do. And you do it once, twice, and the third time they'll come back. So I think, yes,
Exactly.
you need to be friends with them. If they don't like you as a person, that will be very hard. But then you have to provide real value as well.
Absolutely. And another tip that I've learned over the years is that the more you include people in the process, the more they feel invested, the more they feel part of it. So like your example with the deck, right? We've done that several times. And a couple of times it was like, hi, here's the deck. But you know what? Who's going to embrace that?
Right.
But if you take the time, like we just built a master deck, at Wevo. It's like, oh, well, let me sit with the head of sales and get her input and see what she thinks. And, before you then go and show it to the team, that's a completely different process. And you're still leading the process. You're still doing the deck, But first of all, their input is critical because they're the ones that are usually actually presenting that deck. And they're going to tell you if it works or not, like that feedback you got. And on the other hand, now they feel part of it. So it's like a joint thing. And that's, again, to putting egos aside, et cetera, while not, of course, losing credibility, your credit or whatever it is, but just doing things together. Again, you don't want to have 300 people reviewing every piece of content you put out. You do need to own your domain. You need to have your opinion. You need to say why it works. And like you said, provide that value and be credible. But on the other hand, the more you include people in the process, the more they feel a part of it and the more they get behind you later on when, there might be something that you have to debate about, et cetera.
That actually reminds me of a interesting problem that I had with an employee of mine who was pretty unhappy. And the way we would work is I would represent the team with product, with sales, because I didn't want my employees to deal with, complex personalities and like internal political disagreements. So I said, hey, let me talk to product. I'll get what's going on. And then I'll come back to you and we could work together on whatever it is. But I found out that they wanted to be involved in the process. They wanted a seat at the table. They wanted to hear from the product team what's working, what's not working. And just bringing them into the room, and usually maybe they have a question, maybe they have a comment, it just brought them into that process so much more and really improved their personal satisfaction. And I also think the end product became better because they were involved earlier on.
Absolutely. So, we could do this for 10 hours at least. But like going back to the original topic of building marketing teams, right? That's a great segue into I'm a big believer in having a mix. Of professionals on your team. And I am a huge believer in junior talent and giving people an opportunity. I think that as the high-tech world has gotten older, I remember when I started my career, all you had to be was nice, smart, and have a little potential and maybe know someone. Now, every hire is you need 7 years of experience for this, and you got to have a home task, and, you go through 10 cycles of hell until you get the job. But, and that's okay, and there's a lot to be said for that. But I always, on any team that I manage, I always make sure that we have a mix of kind of specific expertise and experience of people that know their stuff. And on the other hand, really exciting young professionals that are looking to get kind of their foot in the door and just start. And I think that we need to keep that always front and center. And to your point about, bringing the employees into the room and the team leaders, et cetera, I'm a big believer in growing talent. And there's no better way to do that than empowering them and letting them kind of fail or succeed or learn from their own flops and successes. So absolutely, that's critical. And I think that it's really important not to lose sight of, those young people that it's a chicken and egg thing, right? How are they ever going to get that 5 years of experience if no one gives them that first job and that first opportunity? So when I hire people, again, it depends on the role, but it's always a lot around values and personality or I want to say traits, right? If it's smarts or drive or being funny, being creative, et cetera, in addition to, okay, tell me about this digital campaign that you may have done or this content that you might have written.
So you kind of answered my question, but I'm going to ask it again because I think it is important. Tell me from both sides, as a manager, how can I identify someone with not a ton of experience that will bring me a lot of value? And then from someone who has that passion, has the enthusiasm, but doesn't have a ton of professional experience, how should they position themselves to tell a CMO or a marketing executive, hey, I may not have the on-paper experience, but I'm awesome?
Sure. So, I mean, look, you're not always going to know as a CMO or as a hiring manager or whatever. And sometimes it's about, your gut feeling and your intuition and all those undefinable great things that we have as humans. My personal feeling is that when you're hiring people and you're, in a job interview from both sides, there needs to be some chemistry. And I think that many times people look at their careers very logically and decide, okay, I've been here long enough, now I need to move. I've never, done that. But on the other hand, I'm not saying that's the wrong thing to do. I just feel like you spend a lot of time at work.
You do.
You do. You spend a lot of time at work, especially if you like it. And you like so you need to be with people that you enjoy, and in an environment that feels good. So if you're in a job interview, actually I was just speaking to someone the other day, and it's like, you know what? She had like 3 different offers and processes going on. But she's like, but everyone I spoke to, at this company, I just felt good about. That's a huge indication of a good place to continue with, et cetera. How can you convince someone that you're going to be amazing? You need to acknowledge, that maybe you don't have that experience. I wouldn't go too far, like, oh, I don't know anything. But you need to be a fast learner, and you need to make sure that that's known. You need to try to portray that, and even if it was at a restaurant you worked at or wherever it was, you need to show those traits of, I'm a fast learner, I pick things up quickly, I love to learn, I'm really good at like getting into the nitty-gritty of things. I have a ton of drive, right? I'm hungry for this. I want to succeed. And yeah, I'm willing to do the work. I feel as if society, with the different generations that we have now, people are a little bit lazier than maybe we used to be. We're a lot more privileged in a lot of ways. We have, like, as I said, high tech has matured. So now there's processes and there's benefits and there's a yearly salary review that we never had any of that stuff, right?
It's a lot more structured now.
Yeah, it's structured, which is in a lot of ways good. But on the other hand, like, well, maybe you don't deserve a raise.
Right.
Maybe you haven't proven that you should get a raise every year. Maybe, you should work for 3 years because the company is in a situation that we're not giving rate. Like, why don't you prove to me why you deserve,
right,
all the amazing things that we can offer? And again, I'm a little extreme here, but I feel like those are the types of things that at least I look for, right? You're looking for drive, you're looking for personality, you're looking for work ethic, and you're looking for someone who's not afraid to try things and who is willing to learn. And that's a great way to portray yourself, as you're going into a job. Just one additional note, there's nothing we can do about it. You have to have some AI experience. So if it's in your personal life or whatever it is, if someone that shows me in today's day and age that they're using AI, that it's almost becoming second nature, and that's actually an advantage that the young people have nowadays, I feel like. That's going to be something that I'm going to look at very seriously, as opposed to someone who, doesn't talk about it at all or doesn't mention it.
Right.
Because, it's the future.
So I really agree with the transferable skills that you mentioned. Whatever your experience is, it's substantial. So if you were a event manager, right? So you probably have great attention to detail, right? If you
and
were
project management skills.
There you go. So tell me about a event you put together and about all the moving pieces. And once I as a manager understand that experience you had, how could I take that and take it in to my world? Regarding AI, I think that's a very important point, and a lot of younger people do play around with AI, but hopefully Many of our listeners also have tried around with it. But something I really liked, and I have a friend who's done this, I think there's an element, if you really have very little experience, show me that out-of-the-box initiative that you do.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend who would record a video of herself on her phone, just talking to the hiring manager or the HR manager, introducing herself, telling a little bit about who she is. And with the amount of resumes we get for these junior positions, being able to stand out, and it's not hard today to create an AI video, to take out your phone and film yourself talking on camera. They're simple things, and we all know those videos that go viral on LinkedIn of someone saying, "Hey, I'm looking for a job." So I think there are places to prove kind of out-of-box ideas.
Go the
to do
extra
that.
mile. I remember in one of the shout-out episodes, I think it was... I'm getting too old, so I don't want to say too much and quote the wrong person, but she was talking about how she used to like redesign her resume and, not just in the content, but in the look and feel of it, like for every job that she was going after. Those are things that are going to get someone's attention.
Right.
And yeah, anything that's kind of a little bit extra, a little bit cooler, a little bit thinking out of the box, and definitely if it's using AI, people will notice that today, and it'll get you a couple more points.
So you mentioned AI, and I think when we're talking about marketing teams, it's hard not to think about it. I think there's this kind of overcorrection where a lot of companies say we could make do with one or two marketers because we'll just use AI for everything. Where do you see the marketing teams going now that we're adopting AI? Are we all going to be replaced by AI?
No.
Okay.
I sure hope not. No, I don't think so. Look, I think it's funny, and this is just dawning on me as we're talking. But I think good marketing today, and I'm seeing this a lot, through thought leaders that I follow, et cetera. Good marketing has always been around authenticity and storytelling and all these like human sides of how we, purchase things emotionally and brand and all that great stuff. And so, ironically or not, that's still the case. And it's even more so the case nowadays, right? There's a ton of talk around how do you stand out in marketing? How do you stand out, as a brand? And there's all this AI content coming out that many people bash, many people, don't know how to use it properly, et cetera, et cetera. And what will stand out is that authenticity, that human connection, and that remains in marketing and it remains in the workplace, in my opinion. So will we all be replaced? No. We're all going to be more efficient, probably. We're all going to be more automated in a lot of our mundane tasks. We potentially will be, each one of us will have a few agents. I have yet to figure out, exactly how that works. But I don't think we'll all be replaced. I think, as always, the cream of the crop will rise to the top, but that's always the case. And I think some roles will for sure evolve. And that's why I say, like, if you're coming into any job opportunity nowadays, or if you're hiring anyone, if you're not touching on some AI skills, then you're probably not doing the best job that you could be doing. But I think it's more about who's going to perfect that and who's going to learn how to leverage AI in the best way possible so that we can actually continue to show that authenticity and that human aspect of marketing and of work and of people.
Which is actually the exact opposite of what an LLM is. What does an
Right.
LLM do? It anticipates what's the most common next word, right? It looks for the most common answer. And us as marketers, we're looking to do the exact opposite.
Exact opposite.
How are we different? How are we standing out? How are we unique selling point? Like all of those things. So it is different. It's a tool. It's a big tool in our toolbox, and we'll have to learn to use it. I want to shift gears here. You mentioned this briefly. The world of agencies and freelancers. I don't think there's a marketer under the sun who doesn't work with an agency or freelancer. How do you make a decision when to use a freelancer or an agency versus in-house?
Sure. So many times it has to do with budget, or starts with budget, right? I think that the way I've worked in the past and seen at other companies as well is many times you're constrained in the amount of people you can actually hire. And also, for example, when you get into larger companies and public companies and things like that, it's a different budget line.
Right.
So you need to learn to kind of play around with that. For example, I could have a really substantial marketing budget, but I'm really limited on the amount of people that I can grow the team and hire, because that's the way it's portrayed in the P&L, and that's, what we have to show in our next earnings call or whatever it is, or to our shareholders or to the board and whatnot. So I can play around with that as a marketer. So that's one big consideration is, do I have money to hire someone or not? And if I don't, then an agency is a great solution, or a freelancer. There's also the consideration of like how mature that specific practice might be. So take digital marketing, which is one that like everybody kind of like usually starts with an agency and then pulls in-house. It could be PR. It could be SEO. It could be or GEO nowadays. It could be a lot of different things. But ultimately, when you're just starting a new practice, many times you'll start with an agency because it's fast. Usually, it's relatively easy to start and stop versus like hiring a person where you want to commit to a longer term usually, and you're going to get like at the click of a button, you're going to get a lot of expertise. So you can play around with that and you can learn. So agencies are many times a great way to like start a new practice. Good agencies and good freelancers, especially from my perspective, many times they become actually like just part of the team on an extension.
And they could actually sit in the office at times.
Absolutely. So that's another great way of like doing something without full-blown hiring. But it doesn't always work.
Right.
At the end of the day, when you're hiring an agency, so much is about the people. Just like when you're hiring an actual employee. So you can't lose sight of that. And yes, I think many of us have experienced that. You start with an agency, you're with the founder, or you're with the guy who created it, or the woman, who's the superstar, and then things change. The next big customer comes in and you're like pawned off to, maybe someone more junior that doesn't have perhaps all the expertise that you had with the previous team. So it's all about kind of who you're working with as well. But yeah, I'd say those are kind of the two main considerations: budget, and also like the level of expertise that you might have and the time that you've got
Right.
to do it.
Right. So we spoke a lot about building out teams and collaboration. So what would be, for a manager who's looking to make sure that they have the best marketing team out there, what would be those 2-3 top things that they should look for and make sure that they're building out? And it's probably not only hiring people, but just maintaining the structure. Give me a few tips of making sure that my marketing team is balanced, is effective, is working well together.
Well, there's a lot.
You've been doing this for a while. I'm sure you have.
First of all, I think when you look at it as a team, that's really, really important. So a few things that I think that as a team you need to make sure that you have. One is a great culture. The more your team is enjoying each other and the people around them, but definitely kind of building a really fun, engaging, interesting place to work. I stayed at Kaltura for 17 years because I always had like a few criteria. If I'm enjoying the people, I'm learning, and I'm going to work with a smile on my face every day, then that's amazing. Why would I need to look elsewhere, right? But definitely you want to create a team that has a great culture. So when you're hiring people, there are certain values and skills and personality traits that you'll potentially look for. And even though you might have two super talented people, candidates at hand, you're going to probably go for the one that had the most cultural fit or the best cultural fit. And that has nothing to say about the other person. It's just a matter of the fit of the team. So definitely that's one thing. Another thing is, definitely, in my opinion, you want to have a good balance between, like I said, those young, junior, up-and-coming, talents that are coming on board, and the people that kind of have the expertise, the experience, and everything. And you want to make sure you have a good mix of that. And then you want to make sure that you have a great culture of sharing. I know I said culture again, but there's a lot around, when you're thinking about
Collaboration.
maintaining a team,
Yeah.
right? So collaboration, transparency, really good communication. I've always told people, like on any team that I've had or worked with, like if I don't have good communication and we're not, managing to speak with each other, that's a problem. It's okay to have a problem with a deadline.
Right.
It's not okay to not raise a flag. So if that communication is lacking, that's going to be problematic. So always kind of encourage, and like we were talking about before, empowerment, right? So letting people do their job, not micromanaging as much as actually possible. But on the other hand, being in the weeds, being like in there with the team. I feel like, the more a top level marketer has gone through the ranks to a degree and has physically touched a WordPress site or a Marketo landing page or whatever it is, that's going to give them a lot more insight into what their team is actually experiencing and doing every single day. And they'll be able to give better advice when needed and better guidance. And then I guess lastly is prioritization. Many times, we get into the weeds and we're in the day-to-day and we don't always look up and say, wait a minute, what's the 80-20 rule here? Like, what are we focusing on? Are we really making an impact by doing more of the same, or do we need to maybe hold on a sec and test something new, iterate, especially nowadays with all the new technologies out there?
Right. So look at collaboration, make sure you're building people up, prioritize, communicate effectively across the board. All of that makes sense. It's probably easier said than done, and takes experience to know how to do it effectively and make sure that it's done across the board, right? So it's happening on all levels.
Yep.
So maybe one last thing before we go, and I know time flies when we do these.
Absolutely.
Is, we spoke about those larger companies that have the budgets, that have the headcount. What happens, and now you kind of migrated to smaller companies that you have to be super scrappy, which something, knowing you probably like that kind of hands-on, like getting in the weeds, getting your hands dirty. But do you have any recommendations for maybe founders who are listening in, or one-man show CMOs, or one-woman show CMOs? How do you deal with you're one person, you need to build out just starting out, maybe some guidance there for the smaller startups?
Sure. Look, no matter the size of the team and the company, I think a lot depends on some of those superstars. They're not always easy to find. Sometimes they evolve. But definitely, I think in any team in a startup, you need to kind of really focus on finding the right superstars. There are marketers that, for lack of a better term, maybe we would call them a full stack marketer. And as marketing has evolved and as tech has matured, I think that, we've many times kind of put people into buckets, right? I'm a digital marketer, or I'm a PPC guy, or I'm an SEO lady, or I'm a Marketo person, or whatever it is. But still, I think a good marketer is well-rounded. Right. Usually. And of course, there's probably a trade-off, but still. So I feel like probably the first person that you want to try to focus on is that full stack marketer. And they're out there.
Right.
It's someone who maybe is like director-ish level, right? Who's looking to grow, looking to be the VP, the CMO, et cetera. But on the other hand, enjoys the day-to-day work. Definitely someone who's going to be hands-on. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a marketing person who loves strategy, but then is going to need at least 20 freelancers
to do anything,
to do things.
Yeah.
I think with AI, it might be even easier to find nowadays because we're just so much more effective. So if you could find a hands-on marketer who has a bit of kind of not just tactical thinking, but can also see the bigger picture with the few years of experience, but maybe not as many as you might think, they can fill in the gaps with AI.
Right.
You can write things a lot faster than you used to, even if, you're not the best writer in the world, or if you are and you want to just take what AI is helping you do and you could multiply that across a lot of different places. So I think, You're definitely looking for, and good luck, but like a superstar full stack marketer who is finishing up a few years in a marketing team or in an organization and looking to kind of take that next step, and that you can guide them, and also they can from there start building out a team.
And when you go from there, I assume that's where we start getting probably one person from each bucket that you spoke about in the beginning.
Correct.
One person who does the science, the other who does the creative.
Correct. And it also depends on the organization, right?
So, and the needs and the...
Exactly. I mean, some companies now are focused, like if you're focused on ginormous enterprise customers, long sales cycles, et cetera, you might not need a demand gen person yet. You might want to focus primarily on brand and getting your name out there. And then you've got, your nifty sales and biz dev guys that are going to find those target accounts and go after them. Or if it's product-led growth, you need like the biggest, best UX and PPC people that are going to just nail those digital campaigns. So like you would go bucket by bucket, but it would be based on kind of the goals and the structure of the business.
And that's something important that we probably didn't... We mentioned it throughout this conversation, but at the end of the day, the business will need something different. It depends on a million different things. As you mentioned, who's already there, who the customer is, how the sales motions work. Yep. And you would build the team based off of also what the organization needs, no matter the size.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think we sadly have to finish up. Before we go, I do want to thank... Google for Startups, who hosts us every week. They're actually a great place if you have a startup and you're just starting out and you are looking for that full stock marketer. Google for Startups will give you a lot of the infrastructure to build. I want to thank Rotem Simon, who is here as always, who does all the hard work on putting this together. If you enjoyed this podcast and others that we've done, please like, comment, and share. Lisa, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This was a blast.